Hello, Internet. Welcome to episode 2 of the Lost in the Stars podcast. Um, I'm Emily, if you didn't know that already. I have a master's degree in mental health counseling, also an artist, and I'm just a person who likes to yap about things related to mental health, spirituality, growing, being a human, living your best life, relationships. And so that's why I started this podcast to talk a little bit more about that. And in this episode, I had the idea to talk about emotions, which is a very general theme. I think there's a lot to say about emotions. Um, but I have some particular views as just a human that's experienced a lot of emotions very strongly, and also someone who has studied counseling and therapy and what emotions mean. Um, so, yeah, I guess we'll dive right into it. I think where I want to go with this mainly is just to, I guess, destigmatize our experience of emotions. I feel like, yeah, I think as a society we have like a sort of general view of emotions or experiencing emotions that granted has been changing as we've been more accepting and understanding of mental health and the importance of being aware of your mental health and caring for it. But I still feel like there's a lot of, I guess, negativity placed towards the experience of emotions and just a lot of misunderstanding. And not to say that I perfectly understand exactly what emotions mean and are, but I feel like I have created a more affirmative understanding, a more productive understanding of emotions as someone who has been a client or a patient on one side of mental health and then has become the other side of that, counseling other people and learning about that and wanting to learn about it for me. So I'm just feel like I'm just talking around the subject right now. So let's get into it a little bit more. I think a direction I feel like most passion to go towards is to talk a little bit more about anger. I feel like anger is the one that gets the worst rep. I feel like anger is really misunderstood and misplaced and villainized. Um, and I don't think that needs to be the case. I feel like that sort of perspective around anger, like this is this awful thing, I don't want to hold this in my body, it doesn't feel good, or like, oh, that person is so angry. I feel like all that comes from misunderstandings that we have around our own experience of anger and, yeah, like what anger means. And so I'm going to share what I feel like I have grown to learn that anger means, and has brought me to a place that I feel good about, especially as someone who was an angry teenager. And, like, yeah, I would say up to 20, I was a very angry person. Definitely fell into like the trope, the category of like, yeah, like the angry daughter who just like is mean and just yells about everything and just like, leave me alone, like, don't come in my room, mom. That was definitely me. And I remember at the time, I had just so much like it was like anger that like fed into like more anger and like frustration and shame, because it was like I am so angry about all these things and I can't do anything but just like live in this anger and react through this anger, and I hate it and it feels awful and everyone hates me and I don't want to live like this. And now looking back, I'm like, of course I was fucking angry. Like, I had a lot to be angry about. Like, what was going on in my house, in my family system, how I was being treated was angering. It was maddening. And like my body and my emotions were reacting in ways that made sense. Like I'm not just some lifeless rock that can be pushed around and just not react. Like that's not who we're here to be. Like there is a purpose to your emotion in a personal level and a deeper level. And I'll get into that later, but let's just keep on the personal level for now. Um yeah, and so now looking back, I'm like, of course I was angry. Like I have this affirmation, this understanding. Like I'm able to go to my younger self, my teenage self, and be like, yeah, you should be angry. You have a lot to be angry about. And just how frustrating is it to be that angry and not have anyone like make the effort to understand why. And I feel like that's how we respond to anger. It's just like an annoying thing that we want to put in this box. We have it about ourselves, and when we see it in other people, it's just like scary or this annoying thing. We want to put it away. We don't want to see it. You don't want to feel it, you don't want to see it. Like do your breathing exercises, calm down, go for a walk. I don't want to deal with your anger. And I think it's understandable to some sense that we have that perspective around anger because reacting and living through anger leads to hurting others, like yelling at people, blowing up, often like more extreme than that, to a way that like through anger people are often very traumatized. I know that that has been experienced for me. I think most people can say like if they have experienced trauma, like anger was probably a part of it. I think um it's very understandable. And I think the way to navigate that is to not just see it and want to quell it, but to first understand it. Um, and I think I think every emotion for each person in general may have some similar meanings, but I think that it's your job to make an effort to explore what your emotions mean for you, because it's not just like, oh, I'm feeling this sensation. Like throughout your life, that sensation develops stories, like the times that you felt that. And I think that becomes almost like this own being, this own entity after that much experience. And so you have to make the effort to understand it for yourself. But I think for most people, anger probably comes about for similar reasons. And if that's not the case for you, I'd love to hear it. But I feel like anger at least comes up for me in injustice, whether that be towards myself or other people. And I think a huge one, and I really encourage you to question if this might be a cause for your anger, is a crossing of a boundary. And that can sort of like correlate to injustice, but like I'm not being treated well, I would say anger. Like this isn't right. I'm not being treated well, or this person is in some way crossing a boundary of mine. Um and I think that can get complicated because boundaries are not so straightforward. And when we grow up in households where we're not really encouraged to understand our boundaries, or when members of our family actively benefit from us having a lack of boundaries, it can be really tricky to see that that's what's happening or to understand it, especially when there's complicated emotions. Like, I have this anger because this boundary is being crossed. I don't even understand what a boundary is. I don't even know what's being crossed. And also, on top of that, I get some sense of like praisal for having that boundary crossed. I think a good example of that would be like maybe a parent who overshares or kind of uses you as their emotional support person, their like mini therapist. They're crossing a boundary by switching up the dynamics, and the roles, parent to child roles, because a parent should not be being therapized by their child. They should be in a place to handle their emotions for themselves or within peers, like people at a similar level, like a partner or their friends or their own therapist, should not be going to their child for their support. Um, that's a huge crossing of a boundary. And I think when something like that happens, your body probably feels this anger, or that anger accumulates over time. But at the same time, it's complicated because there's a sense, or there could be a sense, it probably is different for each person depending on the context of, oh wow, like I was able to help mommy, or mommy was so nice to me after I was sitting with her with that. There could also be like maybe grief that comes up where it's like, or confusion of like, mommy was sharing all these things, but it's hard for me to share things with mommy. Or even confusion or fear, like mommy is sharing all these things about dad, or about finances, or about, are we gonna, like, her job. And now I'm scared, like, are we not gonna have a place to live next month? Are they getting a divorce? Like, do they hate each other? Like, there's just so many compounding emotions to something like that, that it really is hard to understand that there could be anger in there, or that anger could be just completely overcast by the rest of the emotions, that it's something that builds up and doesn't come up until later. I think that's why we have this sort of trope of the angry daughter, where she's not just like a bad person or just like a mean person. Like, she's probably a teenager who's dealing with a lot of fucking shit. Being a teenager is complicated, biologically, emotionally, socially, and had enough. She's had enough, and it's understandable why, like, all the anger would then come up, and it's like, I can't do it anymore. Like, every little moment of all of those years of violations that were crossed, like anything that reminds her of that brings about all that compounded anger. And it's understandable. Like, it's not something for us to vilify. And that's why it's so important for us to understand our emotions. And I think in this case, it's like, when you're a kid or a teenager in that situation, unless you have parents that are willing to change, um, in that situation, it's probably serving you psychologically to not really fully understand your emotions. But when you become adult and you have authority over your life and you can change things, it's very important to understand your emotions so that you don't replicate the same things, and so that you don't live through them. Um, and I think an example of that would be like, having this resentment about, this is where I think the story comes into play, right? Like, I'm trying to think of an example. Like, let's continue on with that, that little girl, that person, because I think that people of any gender can kind of be like their parents' little helper. I think we also have like the trope of like the golden boy, the parentified child, like a mini therapist. I think those all play to a similar theme of like this role reversal, where the child is somehow engaging in a role where they are offering emotional support to their parent at an inappropriate developmental stage. And I think something that can grow into, right? Okay, if we have it unchecked, unhealed, goes on for years, then you become super angry. You don't want mom around. You hate mom. Like, you resent her for making you be her therapist. You have this anger inside of you for the ways that she wasn't able to support you, whether you're aware of it or not. And then that could develop into an adult who, it probably will continue on in the same way in your relationship with your mom, but it could also expand into, whenever any friend needs me, I don't want them. Like I start to dislike them, or I get this icky feeling in my body, or I just don't want to be around them. Or I get angry. Like, why do they need me? Like, I had to figure all this shit out. Like, everyone always needs me. Um and it's so understandable you'd feel that way, right? Like there's this inner, like there's this feeling, this story, these repeated experiences. If you're into like parts work, there's this part of you that's had enough, like it's grieving all these years where they should have been supported and there was no space for their needs because a parent needed support and couldn't handle themselves on their own. And so now when anyone needs them, it's exhausting. Like they just have had enough of that. It's so understandable. And it's also not serving you anymore, right? Like it's true that happened to you as a kid. Like that sucked. That was not fun. Not a positive experience. You missed out on something. There's something to grieve there. Like you were placed in a reversed role. You deserve to have that anger. And also, the way that this story is continuing to unfold in your life is keeping you away from having genuine connection, because to be a good friend, you need to be able to offer support to someone. Like it needs to be mutual, you know. You don't want to be in a position where you're always supporting someone, but you know, you're going to fall on hardships and your friends are going to fall on hardships, and you need to be there for each other. And so this is something that you need to you need to get over, like get through. um and I think that's a way that understanding your emotions, understanding your anger does serve you, because you can be like, oh wow, when I was a kid, all this anger built up because of all this. And now I still feel it. And it's coming up in situations that remind me of that. And it's hurting me. It's hurting my friendships. I don't want to do this anymore. Let's leave it where it's meant to be and let's find some way to express it. I think expressing anger, understanding, first of all, we got to get there, because if you don't even know where it's coming from, it rules you. It just happens and you don't even know what's happening. You're just living life through these emotions. Um, and once you understand it, like this is where it's coming from, this is why it keeps coming up. Now we need to find a way to express it. It's not just like, it's not something we want to push away and ignore, right? I think a lot of mental health care that I've seen can play into that, where it's like, okay, just do your breathing exercises to calm down, or just do your mindfulness meditation to calm down. It's always about calming down. It's always about being calm and small and chill and easy. And yes, you want to have times for that, but also you want to understand your anger and you want to find healthy ways to express it. Okay, a healthy way of expressing it is not like ignoring your friends, yelling at them. It's not like yelling at somebody at work or flipping people off when you're driving. I'm trying to think of, it's not any being abusive towards people because you're angry. It's none of that. It could be, I mean, it could be freaking like just stomping in your room, stomping around in your room. As long as you're not doing that in front of your kids and like looking like, oh, just like you're having a tantrum. I don't think that that would feel very safe for your children. But like finding a quiet space, a private space where you can stomp around or throw a pillow around, or even like doing something more productive where maybe you're like making splatter art, or maybe like you're going with friends to what are those called, like a breaking room. um Damn, what is that called? Anyway, someone tell me what that's called. I definitely know what it, I just forgot the word. Whatever, happens sometimes. A room where you break things, go to one of those, I think. And I want to spend more time like diving specifically into the like mass view of emotions, and how it affects our society. But I think a productive way to express anger that is positive and healthy would be like going to protest. for example. Like if you're angry about the conditions you're living in or about how you're being treated or like your fellow humans are being treated and you go to protest, that's very productive. You're using your anger and you're saying, I'm going to use my voice to say that this is not okay, to enact change. That's why anger is important. That's why it's not an emotion we can just ignore. Yes, there's ways that you need to figure out how to navigate it that are healthy. For example, just like getting, like if you're mad at your mom about something and you just guys start in a screaming match, that's not going to be very helpful at all. But maybe like taking your time to feel that anger and then write her a letter or like go to her and say, hey, these are some things I'm upset about. Or in a friendship, like, oh, when she did that thing, it made me angry. I'm gonna go talk to her about that because I don't like that. Like, don't do that to me. Like, that's productive. So find a way to express your anger. First, to feel, understand it, right? Understand, why is this anger coming up? What's making me angry? What are the stories behind this anger? Because I think it could be one moment and then it could also be a huge thing because it's compounded by a million moments where maybe it's worth bringing it up now or maybe it's completely misplaced. So understanding it, feel it, find some way to do something active with it because anger wants to be acted on. And then do something productive with it as well. Like, what is the anger telling you? Has a boundary been crossed? Do you need to place a boundary? Has someone been mistreated? Do you need to fight for like better treatment? So that's what I will have to say about that. That's what I would say about anger. Yeah, I think that's a good path to take, like trying to understand it, feel it, and then do what you need to do to change the circumstances. I'm trying to figure out what direction to go in. I think we'll talk a little bit more about other emotions and then move on to like zooming out, like the grand scheme of things. So, anger is a huge one. I think anger was like definitely needs to be talked about because I think that is the one that we villainize the most. That having a better understanding of it would change how we function as people, would like vastly decrease how much how how much abuse we're taking on, and would also help us to change things in the world around us, right? In the example of like protesting against injustice or mistreatment. um yeah, that's what I have to say about that. Let me think about some other things. I think some other emotions, they're more about us. That's what I'm feeling. Maybe not necessarily, but I'm thinking about, for example, like sadness, right? And I think everyone's going to have their own sadness. And I think when I think of sadness, I think of like what's missing. That's what it feels like to me. Like something is missing. Like there's not enough joy. Like maybe you're sad. You feel sadness because there's loss, or you feel sadness because you wish you could do this thing, or you don't have as many friends as you would like to have. I think sadness to me feels like a lack or a loss. And I think when you experience that and feel that, like that can tell you potentially what you want to strive to have more of in your life. Like maybe if you're sad for not having enough friends or not spending enough time with people, like that could be a drive to find new ways to meet people or to maybe find some more joy in the connection with yourself. Um, but I think sadness is really something that's so broad that it's going to be different for each person. I'm noticing that as I talk about each emotion, I like, not that I necessarily like, I'm not feeling sad right now, but my energy has changed. Like when I was talking about anger, that was just like, ah, and now I'm like, yes, we're sad. Yeah, I don't know. That's what I feel about that. Maybe I'm missing something. I feel like sadness to me does feel like something lacking very much. Like I think sadness that I've experienced has correlated with like loneliness, isolation, grief, things that are lacking. And so I think in that there can be many directions to go in. I think there could be, okay, I feel this, I want this thing, let's find ways to get it. And then there could also be like, okay, and I need to grieve this. How can I express this grief in a healthy way and find acceptance? Because I think grief tells a story of something that we can't maybe necessarily change, like losing a loved one or realizing you lost maybe a fundamental experience that you deserved. I think a lot of the grieving that I think of is, grieving a relationship or dynamic that there should have been in childhood, or way you should have been treated or cared for. I think that's very much my grief story. Um, and I think when I think about grief from that perspective, and also from the perspective of like maybe a lost loved one, I think there's a direct line to finding some way to activate love. Like like my example that I gave, like grieving how my childhood should have been. I can spend time. This is what I like to do. I think this is the most protective way to experience my grief, besides like feeling it. I think movies, like watching movies that kind of connect to that grief you experienced, whether that be a similar story or the opposite story. Like I know I can experience that sort of grief through like watching a movie where there's like really healthy parents. I think expressing that, getting it out, connecting to it. And then I think a really beautiful way to experience that is then moving through some sort of reconnection, like more specifically, I would say like doing an inner child visualization where you're like, hey, like I'm feeling this, you're feeling this, but I'm an adult now and like I'm here for you, I'm with you, I love you, like I'm not gonna let you be treated like that anymore. I can give you this thing that you're missing. Um, and I think grief of a loved one can be, spending time to reminisce about them or even create like something that allows you to spend time in their memory. That could also be a visualization, right? Like talking to them, writing them a letter, making like a collage of some sort, um a photo album. Yeah. See, like understanding our emotions, they're not our enemies, right? I think they're hard when we don't understand them to move through. And they take energy. It takes energy to tend to your emotions. And I think a lot of people are very low on energy with just unfortunately the way the world is. We just put it into other places or it's expected to be put into certain places. But they're not our enemies. Like they're calls for us to connect and to grow and to deepen ourselves as humans. Let's see, anger, sadness, grief. I think something else I wanted to bring up is like joy. And I think that can go along with inspiration. Um, that one feels more energized. And I think, like that's another thing. I think obviously we don't villainize joy because it's fun to be happy. I think sometimes, actually, I take that back. I think some people do villainize joy. I think those are people that are unhappy and when they see joy, they're like, no joy here. Like, yeah, I'm just thinking about like grumpy people who like hate when kids are like laughing. And granted, like sometimes it's not fun when there's loud noises. I understand. I also too sometimes don't want to be around loud noises. It's like, come on, like they're kids having fun. Like, how would you act in that situation? Tell them to shut up and like stop having fun? Like, just get over yourself. Um, so we do villainize joy. I think unhappy people villainize joy. I think happy people or more mature people understand that joy can be expressed in a loud way. Um, and they don't have this trigger point against it. But joy can be a beautiful emotion to understand because it can tell you what brings you energy and where you're meant to go and what calls for your inspiration and could tell you a little bit more about your purpose and what fulfills you. So I think joy, just as much as where it's important to understand our negative emotions, it's important to understand the ones that we typically view as positive. So that's what I have to say about that. I don't think there's any specific other emotion that I want to bring up unless one happens to come up to me. But I want to talk a little bit more about I want to put my anti-capitalist hat on. I want to talk a little bit more about how not understanding your emotions serves the patriarchy, serves just these systems in place that take advantage of you, that are not for the well-being of the masses. Because I feel like there's been this increase in understanding towards mental health, and inherently that has become more, I'm trying to explain how I see this, trying to put words together how I see this. I feel like as people start to understand their mental health better, and like millennials, Gen Z, like grew up, became adults, became teachers, they started to just inherently, they started to teach it to themselves. They had this sensitivity that allowed them to understand the impact of better understanding their emotions. Like therapy became more normalized. People, the younger generations, took time to understand their emotions, saw the importance, and have then been teaching it to the younger generations. It's almost started this, like, I don't want to use the word war, but this like fight to regain control. And I think we've seen that in a lot of, like, I think especially in Florida, this had been an issue I remember hearing about a few years ago, but I think it's kind of an ongoing thing, especially in the South, where like social emotional learning has been taken out of the curriculum in schools, or like individual parents. This is something I've heard about. Just don't want kids to have books about emotions, or don't want to teach them about that. And I have some things to say. I have some things to say about this. Sorry, I accidentally clicked my microphone. I didn't know if it turned off. I think it's okay. I hope it's okay. I have some things to say about this. um and here's what I have to say. Sorry, sometimes it's hard, like when you have ideas. Maybe you guys relate to this, maybe you don't, and you're like, it's hard to be like all these ideas and now I have to make them into like a constructed sentence that's comprehensible. It is easier to control and manipulate people who don't understand their emotions. And here's why. When you don't have an understanding of why you feel a certain way, you can be told a story about where to put that emotion and displace it into where it's not supposed to be. B, if you aren't even aware and you're not even experiencing or understanding, like you have this emotion, you have this anger in your body, and you're not even connected to, this is anger, like this is what's happening to me, like I am outside of my normal space, my equilibrium. Like if you don't even have that sense of connection to yourself, it's so easy to manipulate you. Like you can displace the anger, like I was saying. You can be told there's no anger to be had, and you just are like, I just don't feel good, or like there's something wrong with me. And with that, this is why it makes you easy to control and manipulate. With that displacement of anger and not being connected to it, not understanding it, anger is the important example here, but yeah. You don't get to process why you're angry. You don't get to understand it. And the people who are making you angry or doing things that are causing anger in you can continue doing what they're doing for longer, until you just break down or until you finally realize what's going on. And I think this is something that happens a lot in family systems, in your individual family dynamic. And let me give an example of that. Like, okay, so you have this human, this person, this child who is being put in this weird dynamic with a parent. I think this often happens with moms, so to make it easy, I'm just going to go with that. You have some sort of mom who is emotionally enmeshed with their child, who comes to them and, tells them about all these things that are just inappropriate for them, the parent, the mom, to be sharing with their child. And this child is offering support. And they start to develop some sort of anger and resentment at some point, because this is a messed up role. They're missing out on what they should be having from a healthy parent. And it's a violation. Like, they shouldn't know this information. If, for example, we have child A who goes to first grade and they're learning about anger. And I will say, just to I think it can be a little more complicated than this. I think this anger can sort of build up and come out later. But for the sake of this example, let's just pretend that this child is angry about this, is experiencing anger about this now. Maybe mom comes and cries when they're want to go out and play basketball, right? So then they'd be understandably angry, and then they have to support mom, and it's so we have child A who's going to school, learning about their emotions, their social emotional well-being. And they learn, okay, anger kind of feels hot in my body. And what are some examples of when I feel angry? I feel really angry when I want to go play basketball and mom is telling me about all these things that dad did. That child is going to go home. They're going to realize, wait, that's making me angry. And depending on their situation, they might start just realizing they're angry and telling mom they're angry. They might start acting out more in a way that makes it harder for mom to go to them, because they're externalizing the attention that they need, and making it very obvious, and that doesn't leave space for mom to start confiding in them. Or they might be in a place where they say hey mom, I don't want to talk about this, I want to go play basketball. It makes me angry when you tell me about these things when I want to play basketball. Depending on the family dynamic, that could be a positive outcome for them. That could be oh, you're right, I didn't realize I was doing that, I'm gonna get a therapist, or I'm gonna go call your Aunt Sharon, could be a situation where that sort of blows up and leads to more anger in the family. But hopefully, if you have a parent who wants to try and grow, that child being aware that that's happening to them, bringing it to the attention of the parent would lead the parent to then change their role and how they're engaging with their child. Now, on the other hand, you could have child B who doesn't learn any of that. They don't know what anger feels like. They don't know what anger looks like. They never have the time to reflect on what their anger is. They are probably going to continue to experience the same pattern with mom. They're not even going to know what anger feels like in their body. It's going to be oh, I just am feeling hot sometimes, or that anger isn't even going to come up in those moments. I think that's where this becomes more of a complicated dynamic. And then they're going to go on And they're probably going to get some job where their boss treats them a certain way that isn't great, and they don't do anything, or they put up with it because they put up with it for decades at home when people were mistreating them, and they don't even really understand their anger. Or they get a partner that does the same thing, where they're like having to caretake for their partner or put into a parental role instead of a partnership role, and it feels normal to them. That's all they've ever known. I think in the grander scheme of things, like, there could be just, yeah, like, there could be inequality, and just injustice in how they're living in the world, where people are not being paid like an adequate wage to live, um where, like, are not being the resources they're given, and these people don't know their anger, and so they just put up with it. They've been taught to put up with it, and so they just continue to put up with things. And I think that's why not understanding our emotions, like, that's an example of how not understanding our emotions serves the people in power, who, they don't want us to fight for, like, adequate resources, adequate pay, because they benefit from paying us less. They get to go buy their third yacht, their seventh house. And of course, they would want to take away our understanding. They would want us to continue to live through dysfunctional childhoods, to learn to accept mistreatment, because it serves their ability to mistreat us. So that's what I have to say about that. I don't know if that's something you thought about before, but anyway, that's why going to therapy, that's why understanding your emotions and journaling and doing what you can to take care of yourself is actually an anti-capitalist radical act. Because if you know why you're angry about something that's happening in the world, and you make an effort to do something about it because you can't stand that anger anymore, or you're just not willing to just sit in it, you're enacting change. You're making an effort to enact change. And I think that's beautiful. Like, this is why it's so important for us to learn our emotions. And it's not just something that, has to happen when we're kids. I think if we can learn those things early on, they become more ingrained in us. And I think, like, if we were to start tomorrow focusing our curriculum towards young children around their well-being, and a lot of people do this, and I think it's great, and I think it's gonna step us into a better world, a more considerate, human-centered world. If we did that with everybody within the next 10-20 years, when those kids are entering the workforce, like, they're not going to tolerate what the previous generations have tolerated. The less aware, less emotionally in tuned generations have tolerated, because they're saying, like, no, this makes me angry. I don't think it's fair. I'm going to do something about it, rather than being complacent because they were taught to be complacent. And I think we are starting to see that. I think we have a lot of, like, I think there's a lot of conversations online about Gen Z just, like, quitting jobs because they're fed up, or, like, just not doing work because they don't think they're adequately paid, or like, a lot of, like, quiet quitting conversations. And I think that's important. Like, I think that's how we enact change. Like, if there's enough people entering the workforce who are like, I don't want to be I don't want to put up with this shit, I'm underpaid. If there's enough people, that's going to shift you into the direction of being paid more. Like, if there's enough people yelling about how we're not being paid well enough, or we're mistreating a certain, like, population, and the mass consciousness is against whatever's happening and are fighting against whatever's happening, something will need to be changed. It just cannot continue on if we're not complacent. So anyway, That's what I have to say about that. That's why you need to get in tune with yourself and your emotions, because that's actually rad as hell, and thank you. Um, so I felt like I wanted to say something else about that. Oh yeah. Yeah, I think that's just abuse in general, like understanding your emotions. I think anger. I think really like anger is a big one here, but I think it can play a part in like sadness too. Like sadness that I think a conversation I've seen a lot of is like about third spaces, right? Because just the way that that our day looks like with commuting and the hours that, you know, especially in America, like the 9 to 5, which is really more like an 8 to 6 or 7 to 7, depending on what your commute and getting ready and everything looks like. Like we've lost, and also with the internet, we've lost third spaces. And I think that has led to a lack of spontaneity, a lack of like ease in connection. And I think people feel that. And I think that has led to a lot of, that can be a factor. I don't know if it's led to, but I feel like that could be a factor or a loss that's part of why so many people feel sadness in relationship or just in general and are isolated, because it's work and home. And there isn't that like natural connection going to a third space, or just, I don't know if the third space is really the thing, but that plays into part of a thing of just how we've lost connection. That sadness is telling a story of something that we could change to better society. Like our emotions are not just about us. They are like, we are all little like channels of the world, of each other, of the earth. And understanding our emotions and listening to them and acting productively with them makes the world a better place. Like, they are not burdens. I think it can be burdensome to have to tend to them, especially when you're tired from working all day and just holding space for just everything going on. But when we take the time to tend to them and we all like collect together to do so, like we realize that our emotions are very valid, that we're probably experiencing very similar emotions for the same thing, and that we have the power to change things. Yeah, I think very much, I think the moral of the story is not understanding your emotions makes it easier for you to be abused in a family dynamic at like a micro level, and in your world, in your society, in your country, and by your government, by the people at power. And so understanding your emotions is important to fighting back and to making this world a better place, and to like reducing abuse, like making sure there is less abuse, less people are being abused. And also because when we let our emotions fester and we don't understand them and don't heal them, we can become people who are led by them and become abusive people. Understanding our emotions like diminishes that as well, like from you taking part into that cycle of continuing to abuse. So anyway, I think I'm done. I think that's all I had to say about that. I hope I got my point across. Anyway, so start journaling or go to therapy, or they should have like SEL courses for adults. I think that's a great idea. Like we should all do that for kids, obviously, but like there's definitely adults who are lacking in that department. That should be like mandated before you have a child, in my opinion. Anyway, I also think like parenting class, like everyone should have parenting classes. That should be like a free thing offered when you're like expecting, or maybe for teenagers or something. I don't know. That's just my thought. These are just random thoughts. But yeah. So that's what I have to say about that. I think I'm done talking now. Thank you for coming to my podcast. This has been episode 2 of Lost in the Stars. Okay, goodbye.